Book Talk begins at 5 minutes and 7 seconds. Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 643, Giving Mood. This episode of CraftLit is brought to you by our marvelous patrons over at patreon.com/craftlit. This week we would like to highlight Janka Genberg Safant, Jennifer Jordan, Jill Sherrod, Louisa Stratton, and Lewis Gordon, or Louis Gordon. I actually don't know. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting what we do here. You're the best. And if you aren't already a patron, but you would like to be, again, patreon.com/craftlit. Take a look at what all the levels get you. And that includes movie watch night in January coming up. I think I already know what the movie is going to be. And it's going to be fun. All right. So, why the giving mood? I don't know if you have been on Wikipedia at all lately, but as a teacher, I can tell you that in the early days of the internet, when Wikipedia was brand new, it was kind of a crapshoot whether you were going to get accurate information or not. The people who are editors on Wikipedia really take that job very seriously. And they do pull information that is untrue or at least unreferenced and uncited. And now what you get is really, really solid summaries of information, importantly linked out to so that you can go and track down the original references, which for what I do is super, super useful. It gives me an opportunity to do a lot more for going down the rabbit holes for you guys. And I have been donating, I think, $1 a month to Wikipedia for a decade at this point. This is the end of their end of the year campaign. If you use Wikipedia and you appreciate it, if you can donate to them in these modern days of AI and plagiarism, and that's over on the YouTube channel as well. Holy cow, there's a whole thing going on with plagiarism right now. Supporting content that is being vetted by people, human people, not bots, is more important now than ever. There are two sites that I look to double check things when something sounds too good to be true or too bad to be true. One is Wikipedia, because usually if there's a scandal or some kind of misappropriation of information going on, Wikipedia talks about it, but also Snopes. Snopes was, I think a lot of people think that these are a couple of lefties who started Snopes to sniff out misinformation on the right. That's not true. The husband and wife team are conservatives who started Snopes. I don't know what they are now, but that's how they were when they started the website. And I love that Snopes.com will tell you whether a quote or a story that's floating around on the net is true or just misleading or absolutely false. That they give you a scale like green, yellow, and red, but they also give you details and again, links out to the original pieces of reference materials, the original primary sources, so that you can go and read up more on your own. So I try my best to support those places, especially now with all of the scary AI stuff. And it may not be scary AI to you if you don't create things that you're putting on the web. But I can tell you for people who create, it is very scary. And for people who teach, it's very scary. So I was in a giving mood, and I thought I would share that impulse with you. But now it's time to talk about chapters 54 and 55 of the Three Musketeers. So we are on to our next 2 days of captivity for Milady. Last week, we were left with her singing psalms and that kind of foreshadowing of, it really could be very upsetting to listen to her songs, but she has such a beautiful voice. Well, now we're going on to phase 2 of her incarceration. So first, just a reminder, the Duke of Buckingham's name was George Villiers, and he was preferred. He was given honors by the British king at the time, but was not particularly well liked because he was not so good for the women, for one thing, but he just made himself kind of professionally unpleasant to those beneath him. So Catholics hate him, if only just because he's a Protestant, but the Protestants don't necessarily like him either, especially the Puritans. The debauchery thing was just a little bit too much. So just have a heads up that you're going to hear a lot of kind of slanderous things going and being aimed at Buckingham/George Villiers. There's a reference to an order to conduct. This is kind of like an order of exile, or what sometimes was called transport, when people were transported instead of being kept in prison in the UK or England or Ireland. They were put on a transport ship and taken to a penal colony somewhere. Peregrination is just a fancy word for journey, going on a journey. And there's a reference, traveling trains youth. And that was translated slightly differently in one of the modern versions as traveling seasons the youth. You know, you grow up as you travel, your mind expands, it's a good thing, yada, yada. So it's not a particularly important proverb, it's a true. All right, and then we get into chapter 55. Chapter 55 had a lot of references that go all over the place. It is like Dumas decided to load all things ancient and slightly obscure into one chapter. So we're going to go for it. First off, he almost starts the chapter with the word ennui, which in CraftLit land goes back to Pride and Prejudice. I think I have an episode talking about ennui. Oh, maybe it was Turn of the Screw. Anyway, ennui is in the dictionary listless dissatisfaction with the way your day is going. For me, ennui is that feeling around 3 p.m. on Sunday. I don't know if that translates for anybody else, but boy, that is ennui for me. Baal, Baal, the Baal worshippers. Baal was a fertility god. In the Old Testament, the Baal worshippers were not good people. They were idolaters. We don't like that. There is then, shortly after that, a reference to Eloa and Astarte. Or Eloas, Eloas. This was a French poem. I tracked down both the original French poem and a professor's translation of it into English. It's really quite lovely. And in fact, I'm going to read a little part of it for you at the end of today's episode. It's referring to a female angel, which is kind of unique because angels are usually genderless or they're given male pronouns. This is quite definitely in the poem a female angel. So good. And then Astarte, who was a Bronze Age, I think she was Phoenician goddess and a fertility goddess. So how do we treat fertility goddesses in Puritan land time? Not so well. We aren't fans, right? And the Baal worshippers and Astarte worshippers were, I think, pretty much concurrent. They were both somewhere around the 4th millennium before the Common Era. Astarte, too, the only reason I knew about her really was I did a play in college called Witch Burning, and it was a big thing, and we went to a meeting, and I believe that's where I heard a song that we're going to link out to from the show notes. And the chant is Isis, Astarte, Diana, Eketa, Demeter, Kali, Inana. The only two that they've left off of this list are Isis and Aphrodite, and I think it's just because there's so much mythology that is not Wiccan about those two names that it would have been kind of weird to throw them in there. But basically, Astarte, Ishtar, Inanna, Isis, Aphrodite, these were all fertility goddesses, and Astarte was possibly the first one. It's hard to be sure about that for me, who is not a classical historian, but I do know that all of these goddesses, just like many gods, like Apollo, moved around a lot, and moved around because people were trading. And as you trade stories and information and family members, and stuff spreads. But in our context, Eloas, angel, Astarte, not so much the good one. There's also, by the way, Ashtoreth, Ashtoreth. I saw this. I do not know if this is true. It sounds like it's plausible. Please let me know in the comments, show notes, 206-350-1642, heather@craftlit.com. If you know whether this is true or not, please, please, please let me know. I found one reference saying that Astarte and the Hebrew word boshet, which is a word for shame, became merged as Ashtoreth. That's possible. The other thing is the root of the word bashet that was being referenced in another place was being identified as the root for increasing your progeny. I can also see how increasing your progeny, having been a positive thing at one point, could become shame later on. So I don't know if any of that is true, but I sure thought it was interesting. Sticking with the Hebrew thing for a sec, Belial, Belial, is Hebrew for lawless, but it got picked up as another name for Satan. And then there's a semi-legendary Assyrian king who was noted for having been the debauching type. Sardanapalus is his name. You're going to hear a reference to him being compared to Buckingham. So it's the debauch thing again. You will hear again Judith. Judith keeps popping up when we're talking about Milady. And the town that she saved from Holofernes was Bethulia. And you're going to hear all those words aimed at you. So that's what we're talking about. All right. Phew, that is it. I think that's everything you need for chapters 54 and 55 of The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. And if you are listening to a different version, you can skip ahead to 59 minutes and 46 seconds. All right. Here we go.
Chapter 54 of the D'Artagnan Romances, Volume 1, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, translated by William Robson. Captivity. The third day. Felton had fallen, but there was still another step to be taken. He must be retained, or rather, he must be left quite alone, and Milady but obscurely perceived the means which could lead to this result. Still more must be done. He must be made to speak, in order that he might be spoken to. For Milady very well knew that her greatest seduction was in her voice, which so skillfully ran over the whole gamut of tones from human speech to language celestial. Yet in spite of all this seduction, Milady might fail. For Felton was forewarned, and that against the least chance. From that moment she watched all his actions, all his words, from the simplest glance of his eyes to his gestures, even to a breath that could be interpreted as a sigh. In short, she studied everything, as a skillful comedian does to whom a new part has been assigned in a line to which he is not accustomed. Face to face with Lord de Winter, her plan of conduct was more easy. She had laid that down the preceding evening, to remain silent and dignified in his presence, from time to time to irritate him by affected disdain, by a contemptuous word, to provoke him to threats and violence which would produce a contrast with her own resignation. Such was her plan. Felton would see all. Perhaps he would say nothing, but he would see. In the morning Felton came as usual, but Milady allowed him to preside over all the preparations for breakfast without addressing a word to him. At the moment when he was about to retire, she was cheered with a ray of hope, for she thought he was about to speak, but his lips moved without any sound leaving his mouth, and making a powerful effort to control himself, he sent back to his heart the words that were about to escape from his lips, and went out. Toward midday Lord de Winter entered. It was a tolerably fine winter's day, and a ray of that pale English sun which lights but does not warm came through the bars of her prison. Milady was looking out at the window, and pretended not to hear the door as it opened. "Aha!" said Lord de Winter. "After having played comedy, after having played tragedy, we are now playing melancholy." The prisoner made no reply. "Yes, yes," continued Lord de Winter, "I understand. You would like very well to be at liberty on that beach. You would like very well to be in a good ship, dancing upon the waves of that emerald green sea. You would like very well, either on land or on the ocean, to lay for me one of those nice little ambuscades you are so skillful in planning. Patience, patience. In 4 days' time the shore will be beneath your feet. The sea will be open to you, more open than will perhaps be agreeable to you, for in 4 days England will be relieved of you." Milady folded her hands, and raising her fine eyes toward heaven, "Lord, Lord," said she, with an angelic meekness of gesture and tone, "pardon this man, as I myself pardon him." "Yes, pray, accursed woman," cried the Baron. "Your prayer is so much the more generous, from your being, I swear to you, in the power of a man who will never pardon you." And he went out. At the moment he went out, a piercing glance darted through the opening of a nearly closed door, and she perceived Felton, who drew quickly to one side to prevent being seen by her. Then she threw herself upon her knees and began to pray. My God," said she, "thou knowest in what holy cause I suffer. Give me then strength to suffer." The door opened gently. The beautiful supplicant pretended not to hear the noise, and in a voice broken by tears she continued, "God of vengeance, God of goodness, wilt thou allow the frightful projects of this man to be accomplished?" Then she only pretended to hear the sound of Felton's steps, and rising quick as thought, she blushed, as if ashamed of being surprised on her knees. "I do not like to disturb those who pray, madame," said Felton seriously. "Do not disturb yourself on my account, I beseech you." "How do you know I was praying, sir?" said Milady in a voice broken by sobs. "You were deceived, sir. I was not praying." "Do you then think, madame," replied Felton in the same serious voice, but with a milder tone, "do you think I assume the right of preventing a creature from prostrating herself before a Creator? God forbid! Besides, repentance becomes the guilty, whatever crimes they may have committed. For me, the guilty are sacred at the feet of God." "Guilty? "I?" said Milady with a smile, which might have disarmed the angel of the last judgment. "Guilty? Oh, my God! Thou knowest whether I am guilty? Say I am condemned, sir, if you please, but you know that God, who loves martyrs, sometimes permits the innocent to be condemned." "Were you condemned? Were you innocent? Were you a martyr?" replied Felton, "the greater would be the necessity for prayer, and I myself would aid you with my prayers." "Oh, you are a just man!" cried Milady, throwing herself at his feet. "I can hold out no longer, for I fear I shall be wanting in strength at the moment when I shall be forced to undergo the struggle and confess my faith. Listen, then, to the supplication of a despairing woman. You are abused, sir, but that is not the question. I only ask you one favor, and if you grant it me, I will bless you in this world and in the next." "Speak to the master, madame," said Felton. "Happily I am neither charged with the power of pardoning nor punishing. It is upon one higher placed than I am that God has laid this responsibility." "To you? No, to you alone. Listen to me. Rather than add to my destruction, rather than add to my ignominy—" "If you have merited this shame, madame, if you have incurred this ignominy, you must submit it as an offering to God." "What do you say? Oh, you do not understand me. When I speak of ignominy, then I speak of some chastisement, of imprisonment or death. Would to heaven! Of what consequence to me is imprisonment or death?" "It is I who no longer understand you, madame," said Felton. "Or rather, who pretend not to understand me, sir," replied the prisoner with a smile of incredulity. "No, madame, on the honor of a soldier, on the faith of a Christian." "What? You are ignorant of Lord de Winter's designs upon me?" "I am." "Impossible! You are his confidant." "I never lie, madame." "Oh, he conceals them too little for you not to divine them?" "I seek to divine nothing, madame. I wait till I am confided in, and apart from that which Lord de Winter has said to me before you, he has confided nothing to me." "What, then?" cried Milady with an incredible tone of truthfulness. "You are not his accomplice? You do not know that he destines me to a disgrace which all the punishments of the world cannot equal in horror?" "You are deceived, madame," said Felton, blushing. "Lord de Winter is not capable of such a crime." "Good," said Milady to herself. "Without thinking what it is, he calls it a crime." Then aloud, "The friend of that wretch is capable of everything." "Whom do you call that wretch?" asked Felton. "Are there then in England two men to whom such an epithet can be applied?" "You mean George Villiers?" asked Felton, whose looks became excited. "Whom pagans and unbelieving Gentiles call Duke of Buckingham," replied Milady. "I could not have thought that there was an Englishman in all England who would have required so long an explanation to make him understand of whom I was speaking." "The hand of the Lord is stretched over him," said Felton. "He will not escape the chastisement he deserves." Felton only expressed, with regard to the duke, the feeling of execration which all the English had declared toward him whom the Catholics themselves called the extortioner, the pillager, the debauchee, and whom the Puritans styled simply Satan.
"Oh, my God, cried Milady, "when I supplicate thee to pour upon this man the chastisement which is his due, thou knowest it is not my own vengeance I pursue, but the deliverance of a whole nation that I implore."
"Do you know him, then?" asked Felton.
"At length he interrogates me,"
said Milady to herself, at the height of joy at having obtained so quickly such a great result.
"Oh, know him? Yes, yes, to my misfortune, to my eternal misfortune."
And Milady twisted her arms as if in a paroxysm of grief. Felton no doubt felt within himself that his strength was abandoning him, and he made several steps toward the door, but the prisoner, whose eye never left him, sprang in pursuit of him and stopped him.
"Sir,"
cried she,
"be kind, be clement, listen to my prayer. That knife, which the fatal prudence of the Baron deprived me of, because he knows the use I would make of it. Oh, hear me to the end. That knife, give it to me for a minute only, for mercy's, for pity's sake. I will embrace your knees. You shall shut the door that you may be certain I contemplate no injury to you. My God, to you, the only just, good, and compassionate being I have met with, to you, my preserver, perhaps. 1 minute that knife, 1 minute, a single minute, and I will restore it to you through the grating of the door. Only 1 minute, Mr. Felton, and you will have saved my honor."
"To kill yourself?" cried Felton with terror, forgetting to withdraw his hands from the hands of the prisoner. "To kill yourself?"
"I have told, sir,"
murmured Milady, lowering her voice and allowing herself to sink, overpowered, to the ground.
"I have told my secret. He knows all. My God, I am lost."
Felton remained standing, motionless and undecided.
"He still doubts," thought Milady. "I have not been earnest enough."
Someone was heard in the corridor. Milady recognized the step of Lord de Winter. Felton recognized it also and made a step toward the door. Milady sprang toward him.
"Oh, not a word,"
said she in a concentrated voice.
"Not a word of all that I have said to you to this man, or I am lost, and it would be you.
Then, as the steps drew near, she became silent for fear of being heard, applying with a gesture of infinite terror her beautiful hand to Felton's mouth. Felton gently repulsed Milady, and she sank into a chair. Lord de Winter passed before the door without stopping, and they heard the noise of his footsteps soon die away. Felton, as pale as death, remained some instants with his ear bent and listening. Then, when the sound was quite extinct, he breathed like a man awakening from a dream and rushed out of the apartment.
"Ah!"
said Milady, listening in her turn to the noise of Felton's steps, which withdrew in a direction opposite to those of Lord de Winter.
"At length you are mine."
Then her brow darkened.
"If he tells the Baron," said she, "I am lost, for the Baron, who knows very well that I shall not kill myself, will place me before him with a knife in my hand, and he will discover that all this despair is but acted."
She placed herself before the glass and regarded herself attentively. Never had she appeared more beautiful.
"Oh, yes," said she, smiling, "but we won't tell him."
In the evening, Lord de Winter accompanied the supper.
"Sir," said Milady, "is your presence an indispensable accessory of my captivity? Could you not spare me the increase of torture which your visits cause me?"
"How, dear sister," said Lord de Winter,
"did not you sentimentally inform me with that pretty mouth of yours, so cruel to me today, that you came to England solely for the pleasure of seeing me at your ease, an enjoyment of which you told me you so sensibly felt the deprivation that you had risked everything for it. Seasickness, tempest, captivity. Well, here I am. Be satisfied. Besides, this time my visit has a motive."
Milady trembled. She thought Felton had told all. Perhaps never in her life had this woman, who had experienced so many opposite and powerful emotions, felt her heart beat so violently. She was seated. Lord de Winter took a chair, drew it toward her, and sat down close beside her. Then, taking a paper out of his pocket, he unfolded it slowly. "Here," said he, "I want to show you the kind of passport which I have drawn up, and which will serve you henceforward as the rule of order in the life I consent to leave you." Then, turning his eyes from Milady to the paper, he read, "Order to conduct." "The name is blank," interrupted Lord de Winter. "If you have any preference, you can point it out to me, and if it be not within 1,000 leagues of London, attention will be paid to your wishes. I will begin again, then. Order to conduct to the person named Charlotte Backson, branded by the justice of the kingdom of France, but liberated after chastisement. She is to dwell in this place, without ever going more than 3 leagues from it. In case of any attempt to escape, the penalty of death is to be applied. She will receive 5 shillings per day for lodging and food." "That order does not concern me," replied Milady coldly, "since it bears another name than mine." "A name? Have you a name, then?" "I bear that of your brother." "Aye, but you are mistaken. My brother is only your second husband, and your first is still living. Tell me his name, and I will put it in the place of the name of Charlotte Backson. No, you will not. You are silent? Well, then you must be registered as Charlotte Backson." Milady remained silent. Only this time it was no longer from affectation, but from terror. She believed the order ready for execution. She thought that Lord de Winter had hastened her departure. She thought she was condemned to set off that very evening. Everything in her mind was lost for an instant, when all at once she perceived that no signature was attached to the order. The joy she felt at this discovery was so great, she could not conceal it. "Yes, yes," said Lord de Winter, who perceived what was passing in her mind. "Yes, you look for the signature, and you say to yourself, 'All is not lost, for that order is not signed. It is only shown to me to terrify me, that's all.' You are mistaken. Tomorrow this order will be sent to the Duke of Buckingham. The day after tomorrow it will return signed by his hand and marked with his seal. And 24 hours afterward I will answer for its being carried into execution. Adieu, madame. That is all I had to say to you." "And I replied to you, sir, that this abuse of power, this exile under a fictitious name, are infamous." "Would you like better to be hanged in your true name, Milady? You know that the English laws are inexorable on the abuse of marriage. Speak freely. Although my name, or rather that of my brother, would be mixed up with the affair, I will risk the scandal of a public trial to make myself certain of getting rid of you." Milady made no reply, but became as pale as a corpse. "Oh, I see you prefer peregrination. That's well, madame, and there is an old proverb that says, 'Traveling trains youth.' My faith! You are not wrong after all, and life is sweet. That's the reason which I take such care you shall not deprive me of mine. There only remains, then, the question of the 5 shillings to be settled. You think me rather parsimonious, don't you? That's because I don't care to leave you the means of corrupting your jailers. Besides, you will always have your charms left to seduce them with. Employ them, if your check with regard to Felton has not disgusted you with attempts of that kind."
Felton has not told him, said Milady to herself. Nothing is lost, then. And now, madame, till I see you again, tomorrow I will come and announce to you the departure of my messenger. Lord de Winter rose, saluted her ironically, and went out. Milady breathed again. She had still 4 days before her. 4 days would quite suffice to complete the seduction of Felton. A terrible idea, however, rushed into her mind. She thought that Lord de Winter would perhaps send Felton himself to get the order signed by the Duke of Buckingham. In that case, Felton would escape her, for in order to secure success, the magic of a continuous seduction was necessary. Nevertheless, as we have said, one circumstance reassured her. Felton had not spoken. As she would not appear to be agitated by the threats of Lord de Winter, she placed herself at the table and ate. Then, as she had done the evening before, she fell on her knees and repeated her prayers aloud. As on the evening before, the soldier stopped his march to listen to her. Soon after she heard lighter steps than those of the sentinel, which came from the end of the corridor and stopped before her door. "It is he," said she, and she began the same religious chant which had so strongly excited Felton the evening before. But although her voice, sweet, full, and sonorous, vibrated as harmoniously and as affectingly as ever, the door remained shut. It appeared, however, to Milady that in one of the furtive glances she darted from time to time at the grating of the door, she thought she saw the ardent eyes of the young man through the narrow opening. But whether this was reality or vision, he had this time sufficient self-command not to enter. However, a few instants after she had finished her religious song, Milady thought she heard a profound sigh. Then the same steps she had heard approach slowly withdrew, as if with regret. End of chapter 54. Captivity. The 4th day. The next day, when Felton entered Milady's apartment, he found her standing, mounted upon a chair, holding in her hands a cord made by means of torn cambric handkerchiefs, twisted into a kind of rope, one with another, and tied at the ends. At the noise Felton made in entering, Milady leaped lightly to the ground and tried to conceal behind her the improvised cord she held in her hands. The young man was more pale than usual, and his eyes, reddened by want of sleep, denoted that he had passed a feverish night. Nevertheless, his brow was armed with a severity more austere than ever. He advanced slowly toward Milady, who had seated herself, taking an end of the murderous rope, which by neglect, or perhaps by design, she had allowed to be seen. "What is this, madame?" he asked coldly. "That? Nothing,"
said Milady, smiling with that painful expression which she knew so well how to give to her smile.
"Ennui is the mortal enemy of prisoners. I had ennui, and I amused myself with twisting that rope."
Felton turned his eyes toward the part of the wall of the apartment before which he had found Milady standing in the armchair in which she was now seated, and over her head he perceived a gilt-headed screw fixed in the wall for the purpose of hanging up clothes or weapons. He started, and the prisoner saw that start, for though her eyes were cast down, nothing escaped her. "What were you doing on that armchair?" asked he.
"Of what consequence?"
replied Milady.
"But," replied Felton, "I wish to know."
"Do not question me," said the prisoner. "You know that we who are true Christians are forbidden to lie."
"Well, then," said Felton, "I will tell you what you were doing, or rather what you meant to do. You were going to complete the fatal project that you cherish in your mind. Remember, madame, if our God forbids falsehood, he much more severely condemns suicide."
"When God sees one of his creatures persecuted unjustly, placed between suicide and dishonor, believe me, sir,"
replied Milady in a tone of deep conviction,
"God pardons suicide, for then suicide becomes martyrdom."
"You say either too much or too little. Speak, madame. In the name of heaven, explain yourself."
"That I may relate my misfortunes for you to treat them as fables, that I may tell you my projects for you to go and betray them to my persecutor? No, sir. And besides, of what importance to you is the life or death of a condemned wretch? You are only responsible for my body, is it not so? And provided you produce a carcass that may be recognized as mine, they will require no more of you. Nay, perhaps you will even have a double reward."
"I, madam, I?" cried Felton. "You suppose that I would ever accept the price of your life? Oh, you cannot believe what you say."
"Let me act as I please, Felton. Let me act as I please," said Milady, elated. "Every soldier must be ambitious, must he not? You are a lieutenant. Well, you will follow me to the grave with the rank of captain."
"What have I, then, done to you?" said Felton, much agitated, "that you should load me with such responsibility before God and before men? In a few days you will be away from this place. Your life, madame, will then no longer be under my care. And," added he with a sigh, "then you can do what you will with it."
"So," cried Milady, as if she could not resist giving utterance to a holy indignation, "you, a pious man, you who are called a just man, you ask but one thing, and that is that you may not be inculpated, annoyed, by my death."
"It is my duty to watch over your life, madame, and I will watch."
"But do you understand the mission you are fulfilling? Cruel enough if I am guilty, but what name can you give it? What name will the Lord give it if I am innocent?"
"I am a soldier, madame, and fulfill the orders I have received."
"Do you believe, then, that at the day of the last judgment God will separate blind executioners from iniquitous judges? You are not willing that I should kill my body, and you make yourself the agent of him who would kill my soul."
"But I repeat it again to you," replied Felton in great emotion, "no danger threatens you. I will answer for Lord de Winter as for myself."
"Dunce!" cried Milady. "Dunce! Who dares to answer for another man when the wisest, when the most after God's own heart, hesitate to answer for themselves, and who ranges himself on the side of the strongest and the most fortunate to crush the weakest and the most unfortunate?"
"Impossible, madame, impossible," murmured Felton, who felt to the bottom of his heart the justness of this argument. "A prisoner, you will not recover your liberty through me. Living, you will not lose your life through me."
"Yes," cried Milady, "but I shall lose that which is much dearer to me than life. I shall lose my honor, Felton, and it is to you, you whom I make responsible before God and before men for my shame and my infamy." This time Felton, immovable as he was, or appeared to be, could not resist the secret influence which had already taken possession of him. To see this woman, so beautiful, fair as the brightest vision, to see her by turns overcome with grief and threatening, to resist at once the ascendancy of grief and beauty, it was too much for a visionary, it was too much for a brain weakened by the ardent dreams of an ecstatic faith, it was too much for a heart furrowed by the love of heaven that burns, by the hatred of men that devours. Milady saw the trouble. She felt by intuition the flame of the opposing passions which burned with the blood in the veins of the young fanatic. As a skillful general,
seeing the enemy ready to surrender, marches toward him with a cry of victory. She rose beautiful as an antique priestess, inspired like a Christian virgin, her arms extended, her throat uncovered, her hair disheveled, holding with one hand her robe modestly drawn over her breast, her look illumined by that fire which had already created such disorder in the veins of the young Puritan, and went toward him, crying out with a vehement air, and in her melodious voice, to which on this occasion she communicated a terrible energy.
"Let this victim to Baal be sent, to the lions the martyr be thrown. Thy God shall teach thee to repent, from the abyss he'll give ear to my moan."
Felton stood before this strange apparition like one petrified. "Who art thou? Who art thou?" cried he, clasping his hands. "Art thou a messenger from God? Art thou a minister from hell? Art thou an angel or a demon? Callest thou thyself Eloa or Astarte?"
"Do you not know me, Felton? I am neither an angel nor a demon. I am a daughter of earth. I am a sister of thy faith. That is all."
"Yes, yes," said Felton. "I doubted, but now I believe."
"You believe, and still you are an accomplice of that child of Belial who is called Lord de Winter. You believe, and yet you leave me in the hands of mine enemies, of the enemy of England, of the enemy of God. You believe, and yet you deliver me up to him who fills and defiles the world with his heresies and debaucheries, to that infamous Sardanapalus, whom the blind call the Duke of Buckingham, and whom believers name Antichrist."
"I deliver you up to Buckingham? I? What mean you by that?"
"They have eyes," cried Milady, "but they see not. Ears have they, but they hear not."
"Yes, yes," said Felton, passing his hands over his brow covered with sweat, as if to remove his last doubt. "Yes, I recognize the voice which speaks to me in my dreams. Yes, I recognize the features of the angel who appears to me every night, crying to my soul, which cannot sleep, 'Strike, save England, save thyself, for thou wilt die without having appeased God.' Speak, speak!" cried Felton. "I can understand you now." A flash of terrible joy, but rapid as thought, gleamed from the eyes of Milady. However fugitive this homicide flash, Felton saw it, and started as if its light had revealed the abysses of this woman's heart. He recalled all at once the warnings of Lord de Winter, the seductions of Milady, her first attempts after her arrival. He drew back a step and hung down his head, without, however, ceasing to look at her. As if fascinated by this strange creature, he could not detach his eyes from her eyes. Milady was not a woman to misunderstand the meaning of this hesitation. Under her apparent emotions, her icy coolness never abandoned her. Before Felton replied, and before she should be forced to resume this conversation, so difficult to be sustained in the same exalted tone, she let her hands fall, and as if the weakness of the woman overpowered the enthusiasm of the inspired fanatic, she said,
"But no, it is not for me to be the Judith to deliver Bethulia from this Holofernes. The sword of the Eternal is too heavy for my arm. Allow me, then, to avoid dishonor by death. Let me take refuge in martyrdom. I do not ask you for liberty, as a guilty one would, nor for vengeance, as would a pagan. Let me die. That is all. I supplicate you, I implore you on my knees. Let me die, and my last sigh shall be a blessing for my preserver."
Hearing that voice so sweet and suppliant, seeing that look so timid and downcast, Felton reproached himself. By degrees the enchantress had clothed herself with that magic adornment which she assumed and threw aside at will. That is to say, beauty, meekness, and tears, and above all, the irresistible attraction of mystical voluptuousness, the most devouring of all voluptuousness. "Alas," said Felton, "I can do but one thing, which is to pity you if you prove to me you are a victim. But Lord de Winter makes cruel accusations against you. You are a Christian. You are my sister in religion. I feel myself drawn toward you, I, who have never loved anyone but my benefactor. I, who have met with nothing but traitors and impious men. But you, madame, so beautiful in reality, you, so pure in appearance, must have committed great iniquities for Lord de Winter to pursue you thus." "They have eyes," repeated Milady with an accent of indescribable grief, "but they see not. Ears have they, but they hear not." "But," cried the young officer, "speak, then speak." "Confide my shame to you," cried Milady with a blush of modesty upon her countenance, "for often the crime of one becomes the shame of another. Confide my shame to you, a man, and I a woman. Oh," continued she, placing her hand modestly over her beautiful eyes, "never, never, I could not." "To me, to a brother," said Felton. Milady looked at him for some time, with an expression which the young man took for doubt, but which, however, was nothing but observation, or rather the wish to fascinate. Felton, in his turn, a suppliant, clasped his hands. "Well, then," said Milady, "I confide in my brother. I will dare to." At this moment the steps of Lord de Winter were heard, but this time the terrible brother-in-law of Milady did not content himself, as on the preceding day, with passing before the door and going away again. He paused, exchanged 2 words with the sentinel, then the door opened, and he appeared. During the exchange of these 2 words, Felton drew back quickly, and when Lord de Winter entered, he was several paces from the prisoner. The Baron entered slowly, sending a scrutinizing glance from Milady to the young officer. "You have been here a very long time, John," said he. "Has this woman been relating her crimes to you? In that case, I can comprehend the length of the conversation." Felton started, and Milady felt she was lost if she did not come to the assistance of the disconcerted Puritan. "Ah, you fear your prisoner should escape," said she. "Well, ask your worthy jailer what favor I this instant solicited of him." "You demanded a favor?" said the Baron suspiciously. "Yes, my lord," replied the young man, confused. "And what favor, pray?" asked Lord de Winter. "A knife, which she would return to me through the grating of the door a minute after she had received it," replied Felton. "There is someone, then, concealed here, whose throat this amiable lady is desirous of cutting?" said de Winter in an ironical, contemptuous tone. "There is myself," replied Milady. "I have given you the choice between America and Tyburn," replied Lord de Winter. "Choose Tyburn, madam. Believe me, the cord is more certain than the knife." Felton grew pale and made a step forward, remembering that at the moment he entered, Milady had a rope in her hand. "You are right," said she. "I have often thought of it." Then she added in a low voice, "And I will think of it again." Felton felt a shudder run to the marrow of his bones. Probably Lord de Winter perceived this emotion. "Mistrust yourself, John," said he. "I have placed reliance upon you, my friend. Beware, I have warned you. But be of good courage, my lad. In 3 days we shall be delivered from this creature, and where I shall send her, she can harm nobody."
"You hear him?"
cried Milady with vehemence, so that the Baron might believe she was addressing heaven, and that Felton might understand she was addressing him. Felton lowered his head and reflected. The Baron took the young officer by the arm and turned his head over his shoulder, so as not to lose sight of Milady till he was gone out.
"Well," said the prisoner when the door was shut, "I am not so far advanced as I believed. De Winter has changed his usual stupidity into a strange prudence. It is the desire of vengeance, and how desire molds a man. As to Felton, he hesitates. He is not a man like that cursed D'Artagnan. A Puritan only adores virgins, and he adores them by clasping his hands. A Musketeer loves women, and he loves them by clasping his arms round them."
Milady waited then with much impatience, for she feared the day would pass away without her seeing Felton again. At last, in an hour after the scene we have just described, she heard someone speaking in a low voice at the door. Presently the door opened and she perceived Felton. The young man advanced rapidly into the chamber, leaving the door open behind him and making a sign to Milady to be silent. His face was much agitated.
"What do you want with me?"
said she. "Listen," replied Felton in a low voice. "I have just sent away the sentinel that I might remain here without anybody knowing it, in order to speak to you without being overheard. The Baron has just related a frightful story to me." Milady assumed her smile of a resigned victim and shook her head. "Either you are a demon," continued Felton, "or the Baron, my benefactor, my father, is a monster. I have known you 4 days. I have loved him 4 years. I therefore may hesitate between you. Be not alarmed at what I say. I want to be convinced. Tonight, after 12, I will come and see you, and you shall convince me."
"No, Felton, no, my brother,"
said she.
"The sacrifice is too great, and I feel what it must cost you. No, I am lost. Do not be lost with me. My death will be much more eloquent than my life, and the silence of the corpse will convince you much better than the words of the prisoner."
"Be silent, madame," cried Felton, "and do not speak to me thus. I came to entreat you to promise me upon your honor, to swear to me by what you hold most sacred, that you will make no attempt upon your life."
"I will not promise,"
said Milady,
"for no one has more respect for a promise or an oath than I have, and if I make a promise, I must keep it."
"Well," said Felton, "only promise till you have seen me again. If, when you have seen me again, you still persist, well, then you shall be free, and I myself will give you the weapon you desire."
"Well,"
said Milady,
"for you, I will wait."
"Swear."
"I swear it by our God. Are you satisfied?"
"Well," said Felton, "till tonight." And he darted out of the room, shut the door, and waited in the corridor, the soldier's half-pike in his hand, and as if he had mounted guard in his place. The soldier returned, and Felton gave him back his weapon. Then, through the grating to which she had drawn near, Milady saw the young man make a sign with delirious fervor, and depart in an apparent transport of joy. As for her, she returned to her place with a smile of savage contempt upon her lips, and repeated, blaspheming that terrible name of God by whom she had just sworn, without ever having learned to know him.
"My God," said she, "what a senseless fanatic! My God, it is I, and this fellow who will help me to avenge myself."
End of chapter 55.
So, I am not sure if it's just me and all the work that we've done on CraftLit, but I'm not satisfied with the way anybody has translated De Winter's, oh, we were doing comedy, now we're doing tragedy, now we're doing melancholy. Somehow, to me, it feels like we're doing melodrama, because melancholy, that kind of fainting couch, back of the hand against the forehead, oh me, ah me, seems to me like classic melodrama, and that totally seems to be what Milady is pulling here. Either way, though, De Winter's attitude is just awesome. But poor Felton, oh my gosh. Okay, the moment where he's like sweating and his hand is to his head and he's starting to get confused, that cognitive dissonance between what he knows and has been warned about by De Winter, but what he sees and is hearing from this quite attractive woman when he doesn't seem to know women particularly well. Oh, boy. It almost feels like De Winter would have been smarter to put someone like the Duke of Buckingham, somebody who is not only not going to care because they've been around the block, they've seen it all, they've heard it all, and she is just a really good practitioner of this particular sport. I also loved the dripping irony when Milady said, no one has more respect for an oath than I have. You know, she said, crossing her fingers behind her back. Wow. You really have to be comfortable with your evil side when you are doing what she's doing to say that out loud shamelessly. And wow, shameless. That's the word. Wowza. Okay, and then to end today's episode, I promised that I would read to you a little bit of the poem, the Eloa poem, translated by Alan Corré. And again, the links in the show notes will take you both to a page describing what he did, as well as document version of his translation. So you can get the French original, his little introduction, the French original, and then his translation. This is just a small bit of it. And it starts with the death of Lazarus. All were grieving. In vain Jesus said, he is sleeping. Seeing the shroud and the dead man, he himself wept. O holy tear given to friendship, you were not abandoned in the winds. A diamond urn with seraphim leaning over it, invisible to mortals, received it softly. Like a marvel, astonishing even to the heavens, carried you sparkling to the feet of the eternal. A favorable look from the ever-open eye touched the ineffable gift and caused it to shine, and the Holy Spirit, pouring forth his power upon her, gave soul and life to the divine essence. Just as the incense which burns in the sun's rays changes into pure fire, a brilliant cherry red, so was a white and growing form seen to go up from the heart of the dazzling urn. A voice was heard which said, Eloa, and the angel appeared and said, here I am. So, from listening to that, you can probably hear Eloa. Elohim is another word for God, and interestingly, it's a plural. The I am at the end of the word is a pluralization of the Hebrew. So Eloa, Elohim, the name of God. Some people think it's because God is the ineffable, limiting God to just anything is a mistake. It's the Moses in the burning bush. Who are you? I am. I am that I am. I am. I just am. I'm everything. I'm all of it. I'm the big kahuna. I got it all. I contain multitudes. But this is also where you get Israel, Daniel, Nathaniel. The L is connecting the first part of the person's name to God. So that's all. I just thought that was a lovely little poem. And that is just the chunk of the tear that Jesus wept being transformed by God into this female angel. So we got a voicemail from longtime listener, first-time caller, Leanne from Portland. Here she is.
Hi, Heather. This is Leanne in Oregon. I do believe this might be the first time I've actually called with a comment, but the Three Musketeers has been so much fun. And I keep thinking back to when you talked at the beginning about how modern some of this book sounds. I just finished listening to 640, where Milady and Lord de Winter are having their big conversation. And you mentioned the point where he points to her shoulder, and it's like that moment. Well, just before that, the line that hit me, and my translation might be a little bit different than what was recorded, but she starts to rush at him. He puts his hand on his sword, and I will defend myself. She says, I'm sure of that. I know you wouldn't hesitate to strike a woman. If I did, I should be perfectly justified, replied de Winter. And in any case, I don't think I'd be the first man who laid hands on you. That's the line that hit me. It's like, oh, no, he didn't. So, anyway, that one just, it hit me. It's like, yeah, I won't be the first guy that hit you, so don't worry about me. Anyway, I'm really enjoying this book. I've not read it before, so this is all brand new to me, and thank you so much for bringing it to my attention and letting us learn more. I will talk to you on our Thursday Zoom call. Thanks. Bye.
Ooh, Leanne, I think that is awesome. Thank you for pointing that out. That 100% reminded me. I just had this flashback to working that summer at Oxford with the actual actors who knew how to do Shakespeare, and having this epiphany moment where we all had to do monologues, and I did Lady Macbeth's, the one where she's trying to push Macbeth into action. And she's trying to do it kind of by shaming him at first and then kind of cajoling him. But the very beginning of it, she says, I have given suck and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. Which is kind of a horrifying line for a 20-year-old to be saying, but it's important because that means she's had a baby who wasn't a stillbirth or a miscarriage. She had a baby. And as we might remember, she and Macbeth have no children. So what happened to her? And so you start saying, oh, so maybe not so much a villain as much as, damn, she's had some life to have to live through and recover from, just like Milady. Thank you for bringing that up. You're so awesome. I thought it was kind of a nice way to end on our 9th day of CraftLit. I hope you have a great week. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas if you celebrate it. I will talk to you soon with the next 2 chapters. And wowsy, if you thought what we did today was good, just wait. All right, have a great one. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. A big thanks to all the CraftLit listeners who support the show by being a premium audio member via craftlit.com/premium or via patreon.com/craftlit. Your support for the show is what's kept us going since 2006. If you feel like getting free audio pretty much every week, please consider supporting the show by heading over to patreon.com/craftlit and pledging what you feel the show is worth to you. If you can't support the show that way, consider leaving a review at iTunes or at our facebook.com/craftlit page, or follow at CraftLit on Twitter and share the show with your followers too. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.